Dr. Samuel Harris, a renowned cardiologist, was leaving the hospital after a long and tiring day. The surgery had been a success, but the physical and emotional exhaustion was evident on his face. With a deep sigh, he decided to take a walk with his stray dog, Max, whom he had recently adopted. The tranquility of the afternoon seemed to be the perfect balm for his weary mind. The sun was beginning to set on the horizon, painting the sky with golden and orange hues. The cool breeze from the river gently caressed his face, and the sound of leaves rustling in the trees offered a comforting calm. Max, a mixed-breed dog with intelligent eyes and scruffy fur, trotted happily beside him, sniffing every corner and bush. Suddenly, Max began to bark excitedly, pulling on the leash and heading towards the riverbank. Intrigued, Samuel followed the dog, who stopped in front of a strange object half submerged in the reeds. As he got closer, Samuel realized it was a coffin, worn and covered in mud. "What the hell?" he murmured, feeling a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Max wouldn't stop barking, as if he knew there was something important inside. Samuel, his heart racing, bent down and, with trembling hands, slowly lifted the lid of the coffin. Inside, curled up and covering his face with his hands, was a boy. He was emaciated, with pale skin and sunken eyes that reflected deep terror. He looked to be about 7 or 8 years old. His clothes were dirty and torn, and his body trembled with fear. Samuel swallowed hard, trying to remain calm. "Hello, I'm Samuel," he said gently, trying not to frighten the boy further. "Don't worry, I'm here to help you." The boy slowly lowered his hands, revealing a face full of fear but also of hope. "Are you going to take me to the bad man?" he asked in a weak, almost inaudible voice. No, I'm here to help you," Samuel replied, extending his hand in peace. "Let's get out of here, okay?" Max, sensing the tension, approached the boy, sniffing him curiously. The dog then sat quietly beside him, his comforting presence helping to calm the boy. "What's your name?" Samuel asked, helping the boy out of the coffin. "Ethan," the boy replied, clinging to Samuel's hand as if it were his only salvation. "Well, Ethan, let's get you to safety," said Samuel, feeling a surge of determination. As they walked back to town, Samuel couldn't stop thinking about what could have happened to this child to end up in such a desperate situation. As they headed toward Samuel's house, Ethan began to relax a little, thanks to Samuel's reassuring words and Max's friendly company. Samuel walked with Ethan at his side, Max trotting faithfully beside them. When they arrived at Samuel's house, the warm light from inside filtered through the windows. The door opened, and Lucas, Samuel's son, came running out, his face lit up with curiosity. "Dad, who is he?" Lucas asked, looking at Ethan with big expectant eyes. "This is Ethan," Samuel replied, leading the children inside. "He's going to stay with us for a while." The interior of Samuel's house was modest but cozy. The aroma of the stew he had left in the slow cooker filled the air, adding a feeling of home. Ethan stood in the doorway, unsure if he should enter. "Come on, don't be afraid," Samuel said, extending his hand. "You're safe here." Ethan finally stepped forward, still clinging to Samuel's hand. Lucas watched him with fascination, and as the three of them sat down in the living room, the conversation slowly began to flow. "Do you like toys?" Lucas asked, pulling out a box full of cars and action figures. Ethan nodded timidly, and soon the two children were immersed in imaginative play, their laughter and chatter filling the room. Samuel leaned against the wall, watching the children. He felt a mixture of relief and concern, relief because Ethan seemed to be relaxing, and concern because he still didn't know how to handle the situation. "Dad, can Ethan sleep in my room?" Lucas suddenly asked, looking at his father with pleading eyes. Samuel smiled. "Of course, son, but first, Ethan needs a bath and some clean clothes." They prepared a hot bath for Ethan, and while the boy bathed, Samuel rummaged through Lucas's closet, finding pajamas that would fit him. As he emerged from the bathroom, Ethan seemed calmer, though still somewhat withdrawn. "Dinner's ready," Samuel announced, serving the stew at the table. They sat together, and although Ethan ate in silence, his face showed gratitude. After dinner, Lucas took Ethan to his room, eagerly showing him his toys and books. "This is my favorite car," Lucas said, handing Ethan a toy car. "You can play with it all you want." Ethan took the car, his eyes shining a little brighter. "Thank you," he murmured, barely audible. While the children played, Samuel stayed in the living room, his mind racing with questions. Who was Ethan really? What had happened to him? Should he call the authorities now or wait until he had more information? Finally, he decided to wait. First, he needed to gain Ethan's trust and make sure he was safe. Tomorrow would be time enough for difficult decisions. Later, when the children were asleep, Samuel watched them for a moment. Lucas, always generous and friendly, had already accepted Ethan as a friend. Ethan, although still wary, seemed to find comfort in Lucas's company and in the safe home Samuel provided. Turning off the lights, Samuel went to his room, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He knew this was just the beginning of a long and complicated story, but he was determined to do everything possible to protect Ethan and uncover the truth behind his situation. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon when Samuel got up, letting the faint dawn light illuminate the house softly. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the silence of the morning as he prepared breakfast. His mind wouldn't stop churning over Ethan's situation. He stared intently at the pan, watching the egg cook slowly, but in reality, his mind was miles away, lost in a sea of thoughts. Ethan, still sleepy, appeared in the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. "Good morning," he murmured shyly. "Good morning, Ethan," Samuel replied with a warm smile. "Sit down, breakfast will be ready in a moment." Lucas was already at the table, leafing through an adventure book, oblivious to his father's concern. When everyone was seated, Samuel served the plates and joined them, trying to maintain a relaxed atmosphere. "Did you sleep well?" Samuel asked Ethan, breaking the silence. Ethan nodded, though his eyes still reflected a vestige of distrust and fear. "Yes, thank you." After a few minutes of silence, Ethan began to speak, his voice trembling but determined. "My grandfather always said we had to be prepared for anything. One day, some men came to our house. I didn't know them, but my grandfather got very nervous. He told me to hide." Samuel looked at him, listening intently. "Do you remember what those men looked like?" Ethan nodded, his gaze lost in painful memories. "Yes, they were wearing dark clothes and talking in low voices, but they seemed very angry. My grandfather argued with them, and then he told me we had to leave." "What happened next?" Samuel asked, trying to sound as calm as possible. "We hid in the woods for a few days. Grandpa told me we'd be safe there, but one night he didn't wake up." Ethan lowered his head, his hands trembling slightly. Lucas, sensing the tension, reached out and placed his hand over Ethan's. "You're safe now," he said in a reassuring voice. Samuel observed the interaction between the children, his mind made up. "Ethan, I want to help you find out what happened. I need to know more about your grandfather and those men. Tomorrow, we'll go to your village and talk to the people who knew your grandfather." Ethan looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "Really? They won't take me back to those men?" "No, Ethan, I promise. No one will hurt you. We'll be in this together," Samuel said firmly. After breakfast, Samuel began planning the trip to the village. He reviewed a map of the region, plotting the route and noting key locations they needed to visit. Lucas, always curious, watched his father with interest. "Dad, can I come with you?" Samuel smiled and nodded. "Of course, son. Your help will be important." Samuel's determination was palpable. He spent the rest of the day preparing, making sure he had everything they needed for the trip. As he packed, he thought about what they might discover in the village. What secrets did Ethan's past hold? Who were those men, and why were they so interested in Ethan's grandfather? Night fell quickly, and Samuel found himself once again watching the children as they slept. Lucas and Ethan, already inseparable friends, shared a connection that gave them strength. Samuel knew that the trip to the village would not be easy, but he was determined to protect Ethan and unravel the mysteries surrounding his life. "Max, watch the house," Samuel said, petting the dog before heading to his room. Tomorrow would be a long and crucial day. The journey was long and winding, passing through green fields and rolling hills. Samuel took advantage of the tranquility of the road to reflect on his own past and the losses he had faced. Max slept in the back seat, occasionally lifting his head to look at the scenery. "Dad, what's Ethan's village like?" asked Lucas from the front seat, breaking the silence. "I don't know, son. I've never been there, but I imagine it's a quiet place, like many rural towns," Samuel replied, keeping his eyes on the road. Ethan, sitting silently next to Lucas, observed the landscape with a mixture of nostalgia and nervousness. "It was quiet until those men arrived," Ethan murmured, almost to himself. The car finally reached the village, a picturesque place with cobblestone streets and adobe houses. Samuel parked in front of a small shop and got out of the car. "Let's ask about Ethan's grandfather," he said, taking the boy's hand. They were walking down the main street when they saw a woman struggling to fix a broken fence, her expression showing a mixture of determination and frustration. Samuel approached, offering his help. "Hello, I'm Samuel. Do you need help with that?" he asked, pointing to the fence. The woman looked up, surprised but grateful. "Yes, please, I could use a hand. I'm Clara," she introduced herself. Samuel and Lucas helped Clara fix the fence, while Ethan stayed close by, watching with interest. "Thank you," Clara said, wiping her hands. "What brings you here?" "We're looking for information about Ethan's grandfather," Samuel explained. "It seems he and Ethan had some trouble before he passed away." Clara looked at Ethan with a mixture of compassion and sadness. "Yes, I know. I knew his grandfather well. He was a good man. Could we talk a little more about that?" Samuel asked, pointing to a nearby bench. Clara nodded, and they sat down while the children played a few feet away. "I found Ethan in the woods," Clara began, her voice trembling slightly. "He was just a baby, wrapped in blankets. His grandfather took care of him as if he were his own, although we never knew where he really came from." Samuel listened intently, noting the sincerity in Clara's words. "And what about those men Ethan mentioned? There was trouble?" Clara sighed deeply. "A few days before he passed away, some men came looking for something. They argued with him, threatened him. I was at home and heard the shouting. After that, he decided to hide in the woods with Ethan. Do you know why those men were so interested in him?" Samuel asked, frowning. "I'm not sure," Clara replied, looking away. "But something tells me it has to do with Ethan's past. Maybe there's something we don't know." The conversation continued, with Clara sharing more details about the life of Ethan's grandfather and the difficulties they faced. Samuel made a mental note of everything, determined to protect Ethan and uncover the truth. "Thank you for your help, Clara," Samuel said as he stood up. "This is just the beginning. I need to make sure Ethan is safe." Clara nodded, her face reflecting concern and hope. "If you need anything else, I'll be here. Ethan will always have a safe place with me." Evening fell over the small village. Shadows lengthened, and the air began to cool. Samuel, Clara, and the children were in the backyard of Clara's house, enjoying a quiet chat. The relaxed atmosphere was abruptly interrupted when a swaying figure appeared in the doorway. Peter, Clara's ex-husband, arrived with an obvious stagger and a half-empty bottle in his hand. His bloodshot eyes and alcohol-laden breath filled the air with palpable tension. "What are you doing here, Clara?" Peter bellowed, his voice rough and full of anger. "And who is this guy?" he added, pointing to Samuel with disdain. Clara stepped back, fear evident on her face. Samuel, remaining calm, stood up and faced Peter with firm serenity. "Peter, we don't want any trouble," Samuel said in a clear voice. "We're just here to talk to Clara." "Trouble?" You don't know anything about trouble, Peter growled, approaching menacingly. Clara is my wife, and you have no business here. Samuel raised a hand, trying to defuse the situation. Peter, please calm down. Nobody wants to fight. But Peter was in no condition to listen. With a roar of fury, he threw the bottle at Samuel, who dodged it narrowly. The bottle shattered against the ground, scattering glass everywhere. The situation escalated quickly. Peter threw a punch, but Samuel, anticipating the move, dodged it and grabbed his arm, twisting it around and disarming him in one fluid motion. The children, frightened, backed away while Clara watched with her heart in her throat. That's enough, Peter, Samuel said firmly, holding Peter immobilized. You can't keep doing this. Let me go, damn you, roared Peter, struggling to free himself. But Samuel did not yield, maintaining his grip firmly but without excessive violence. The villagers, attracted by the noise, began to gather around the yard. Whispers and disapproving glances were directed at Peter, while admiration and respect for Samuel grew. Peter, you must go, said one of the neighbors, an older man with a stern face. You've caused enough trouble. Peter, realizing the general disapproval, finally stopped resisting. This isn't over, he threatened, but Samuel released him, and he staggered away, disappearing into the growing darkness. Samuel turned to Clara, who was visibly shaken. Are you all right? He asked, genuine concern in his voice. Clara nodded slowly, her eyes filled with gratitude. Yes, thanks to you, she said, her voice trembling. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been here. Clara, this can't go on like this, Samuel said, his tone firm but kind. It's too dangerous for you and Emma. I want you to consider moving to the city with me and Lucas. You'll be safer there. Clara looked at him, surprised by the offer. Would you really do that for us? She asked, her eyes welling up with tears of relief. Yes, I would, Samuel replied without hesitation. Not only for your safety, but because I believe you deserve a fresh start away from Peter. Clara took a moment to process the offer, then nodded resolutely. Okay, I accept, she said, her voice firm. We'll move in with you. The villagers, witnesses to the exchange, nodded their approval. Samuel had earned not only their respect, but also their admiration for his courage and compassion. That night, as they packed their belongings, Clara and Emma felt relieved at the prospect of a new and safer life. Samuel, Lucas, and Ethan helped in any way they could, reinforcing the feeling of unity and hope. The drive back to the city was quiet, the starry sky accompanying them. Clara, looking ahead, felt more hopeful than ever. She knew there were still challenges ahead, but with Samuel by her side, she was ready to face them. Samuel, driving with quiet determination, glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Clara and Emma talking softly, their faces illuminated by a newfound hope. Max slept peacefully in the back seat, oblivious to the change of destination. The city slowly awakened under a gray sky. The change of environment was palpable, and Clara observed with attentive eyes the bustling streets and tall buildings. It's very different from the village, Clara commented, trying to hide her nervousness. I know, but you'll get used to it. It takes time, Samuel replied with a reassuring smile. The following days were filled with adjustments and everyday challenges. Clara, accustomed to the quiet life of the countryside, faced the hustle and bustle of the city with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Samuel helped her every step of the way, explaining how things worked and making sure she felt comfortable. Clara, this is the local market. You can find everything you need here, Samuel said one day, taking her to a crowded marketplace. It's so big and crowded, Clara murmured, overwhelmed. Yes, but it's just a matter of getting used to it. Come on, I'll show you the best stalls, said Samuel patiently, guiding her. At home, the family dynamic began to flourish. Clara and Samuel shared the kitchen, preparing meals together while the children played. Pass me the salt, please, Samuel said, stirring a pot of soup. Sure, here you go, Clara replied, feeling a growing familiarity in their interactions. You know, I'm glad you're here, Samuel said, looking into her eyes. Thank you, Samuel. You've given us a new opportunity, Clara replied with a sincere smile. The trust between them grew slowly, cemented by small gestures and shared moments. Emma was integrating well with the other children, and the house was filled with laughter and lively conversations. One evening, while Samuel was reading a book in the living room, Clara joined him. I was thinking, Clara began, what about Ethan? We need to know more about his past. You're right, Samuel agreed. I'm going to contact Detective Harris. He might be able to help us find out more. Detective Harris, a friend and colleague of Samuel's in the police force, was known for his ability to unearth information. The next day, Samuel called him, and they arranged a meeting. Harris, I need your help, Samuel said once they were seated in Harris's small office. This boy, Ethan, we don't know much about his past, and I think he's in danger. Harris frowned, listening intently. What information do you have so far? Just fragments. His grandfather found him in the woods and raised him as his own, but before he died, some men threatened them, Samuel explained, worry evident on his face. All right, let me make some calls and see what I can find. Give me a few days, Harris replied, taking notes. Samuel said goodbye, feeling a mix of hope and anxiety. Back home, he shared the conversation with Clara. Harris is investigating. Hopefully, we'll have some answers soon. God willing, Clara replied, squeezing Samuel's hand gently. The days passed, and a routine slowly settled in. Samuel continued with his work at the hospital while Clara adapted to her new environment. The children, now an inseparable gang, filled the house with energy and life. One afternoon, while Samuel was at the hospital, he received a call from Harris. Samuel, I have something. We need to talk in person, Harris said, his tone serious. Samuel felt a knot in his stomach. I'll be there in half an hour, he replied, hanging up quickly. Samuel entered Harris's office, anxiety evident on his face. Harris was waiting for him, a thick file in his hand and a grave expression. Samuel, what I have found is both surprising and urgent, Harris began, opening the file and showing a picture of a young boy. Ethan is not who we think he is. His real name is Noah Collins, son of Mayor Richard Collins, kidnapped years ago. Samuel was silent, processing the information. The mayor's son? How is that possible? He finally asked, his voice full of disbelief. The records match, and the DNA confirms his identity, Harris said firmly. We have to act fast. We must reunite Ethan with his real father. Samuel nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and worry. Clara and I need to prepare Ethan. This is going to change everything. Back home, Samuel found Clara and the children in the backyard, playing. He walked over to her and gently took her arm. Clara, we need to talk in private. Clara, noting the seriousness in his tone, nodded and followed him inside. What's wrong, Samuel? She asked, her voice full of concern. Harris found out the truth about Ethan. He's the son of Mayor Richard Collins, kidnapped years ago, Samuel said, watching her reaction. Clara gasped, her eyes wide with astonishment and worry. The mayor's son? My God, Samuel, what are we going to do? We have to arrange a meeting. Ethan needs to know the truth and meet his real father, Samuel replied with determination. But first, we have to prepare him for this news. Clara nodded, her gaze reflecting the same mix of emotions that Samuel felt. Let's talk to him tonight, together. That night, after dinner, Samuel and Clara sat down with Ethan in the living room. Lucas and Emma were in their rooms, giving them space for a private conversation. Ethan, we need to talk to you about something very important, Samuel began, his voice calm but serious. Ethan looked at them, sensing the tension in the air. What is it? He asked nervously. We've discovered something about your past, Samuel continued. Your real name is Noah Collins, and you're the son of Mayor Richard Collins. You were kidnapped when you were very young. Ethan's eyes widened, filled with confusion and fear. What does that mean? Am I going to have to leave? Don't worry, Ethan, Clara said, taking his hand. We're here to help you. We just want you to know the truth and to have the opportunity to meet your father. Ethan was silent for a moment, processing the information. Then, in a trembling voice, he asked, "What about you? Will I still live here?" Samuel smiled, trying to reassure him. "You'll always be a part of our family. Nothing's going to change that. But we think it's important that you meet your father and understand your past." The next day, Samuel and Harris arranged a meeting at the mayor's office. The room was elegantly decorated, but the atmosphere was tense and filled with anticipation. Mayor Richard Collins, a middle-aged man with the bearing of someone who has been through many hardships, waited anxiously. When Samuel entered with Ethan, the mayor stood up immediately, his eyes filled with hope and fear. "Noah?" he asked, his voice breaking. Ethan, unsure, looked at Samuel and then at the mayor. "Are you my dad?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Yes, son, I've been looking for you for years," the mayor replied, tears welling up in his eyes. "I thought I'd lost you forever." Ethan took a step forward, his movements hesitant. "Why was I kidnapped?" he asked, his voice laden with confusion and pain. The mayor sighed, approaching slowly. "It was an attempt to hurt me. My work and my decisions put some people against me. I'm so sorry, son." Samuel and Harris watched the scene, feeling the emotional weight of the moment. Ethan finally approached his father, and the mayor embraced him tightly, tears streaming down his cheeks. That night, back home, Ethan seemed overwhelmed but also relieved. "I didn't know what to expect," he confessed to Clara and Samuel, "but I'm glad to know the truth." "We're here for you, Ethan," Clara said, hugging him tenderly. "No matter what happens, you'll always be a part of this family." Samuel nodded, feeling a deep satisfaction and relief. "Yes, Ethan, you'll always have a home with us." The night was quiet in the city, a calm that would soon be shattered. Samuel and Clara were in the kitchen, talking quietly about the next steps for Ethan. Suddenly, Samuel's phone rang, breaking the silence. "Hello?" Samuel answered, his voice worried as he recognized Harris's number. "Samuel, it's urgent. Mayor Collins has been attacked." "They're taking him to the hospital right now," Harris said quickly, the urgency palpable in his tone. Samuel hung up and looked at Clara. "Richard has been attacked." "I have to go to the hospital," he said, his voice firm but full of concern. "Go, we'll stay here with the children," Clara replied, her face reflecting the same worry. Samuel left quickly, arriving at the hospital just as the ambulance arrived. Chaos was evident, with doctors and nurses rushing to stabilize Mayor Collins. Samuel, moving quickly and precisely, joined the team. "We need emergency surgery," one of the doctors said, and Samuel nodded, taking charge. The operating room was filled with tension. Mayor Collins lay on the stretcher, seriously injured. Samuel, with steady hands and a focused mind, began the surgery. The team worked in silence, aware of the gravity of the situation. "We need more blood," a nurse said, and Samuel responded without looking up, "Use mine." The team moved quickly to perform the transfusion, and at that moment, a nurse murmured, "Same blood type, what a coincidence." The surgery continued, and finally, after hours of meticulous work, Samuel stepped back. "We did it," he said, exhaling deeply. Samuel left the operating room and met Harris in the hallway. "How is he?" Harris asked. "He's going to make it, but he's weak. He needs rest and monitoring," Samuel replied, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "Samuel, there's something I need to tell you," Harris said, looking around to make sure they were alone. "The rare blood type, it's not a coincidence. I've been investigating, and you and Richard are brothers. You were separated when you were very young." Samuel felt a momentary dizziness. "What are you saying, Harris?" "It's true. The records confirm it. You and Richard share more than just a blood type," Harris said firmly. Samuel leaned against the wall, processing the information. Brothers, all this time, and we didn't know. Later, when Richard woke up in the hospital room, Samuel was by his side. Richard, there's something I need to tell you, he began, his voice thick with emotion. Richard, still weak, looked at him curiously. What is it, Samuel? We discovered something during surgery. We have the same rare blood type. Harris investigated, and it turns out, we're brothers, Samuel said, his words heavy with meaning. Richard blinked, processing the revelation. Brothers? I can't believe it, all this time, he murmured, tears welling up in his eyes. I know it's a lot to take in, Samuel replied, sitting down next to the bed. But I'm here. We'll get through this together. The following days were filled with deep conversations and emotional revelations. Samuel and Richard began to piece together the fragments of their shared past, talking about their childhood and the paths that led them to be separated. I always felt like something was missing, Richard confessed one day as Samuel helped him walk down the hospital hallway. Now I understand why. Me too, Samuel replied, his voice full of sincerity. But now we have a chance to make up for lost time. The bond between the brothers grew with each passing day. Barriers fell away, and a deep and sincere connection was forged. Clara and the children also joined in this process, supporting Samuel and Richard in their new reality. Ethan, observing his biological father and Samuel, felt a renewed sense of hope. We are a family, he said one day, his voice full of determination. Yes, Ethan, Samuel replied with a smile. And we always will be, no matter what. The revelation of their kinship not only united Samuel and Richard but also strengthened the entire family structure they had built together. They faced the future with a new perspective, knowing that despite the challenges, love and family would always prevail. Samuel and Harris were seated in the inspector's office, surrounded by files and documents scattered across the table. Both men were deeply focused, reviewing every detail and connection in the investigation of the criminals who had attacked Mayor Richard Collins. Samuel, we need to find a way to catch these men before they try anything else, said Harris, his eyes fixed on a map covered in markings and notes. I agree. We have to be meticulous and make sure that every step we take brings us closer to them, Samuel replied, his voice firm and determined. They spent hours reviewing every lead, every witness statement, and every piece of evidence. Finally, a crucial connection was revealed. Here it is, Harris said, pointing to a name on a document. This man, Peter, has been working with the corrupt council president to destabilize Richard's administration. Samuel nodded, feeling a mix of anger and determination. Peter, the same man who's been tormenting Clara. We have to act fast. That night, Samuel and Harris organized an operation to capture Peter and his accomplice. With a team of discreet and well-trained police officers, they headed to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, where Peter was known to be hiding. The tension in the air was palpable as they approached. Samuel, his heart pounding, stood next to Harris, ready to move in. Ready? Harris asked, and Samuel nodded. They entered the warehouse with precise and coordinated movements. Peter and his men, caught off guard, tried to resist, but they were quickly subdued. This is for Clara and for everyone you've hurt, Samuel said in a firm voice. Peter, with a defiant look, said nothing as they took him away. Back in the city, the news of the arrest spread quickly. The community, which had been living in fear and corruption, began to breathe more easily. The influence of the corrupt council president also crumbled, and he was arrested alongside Peter. With the threat eliminated, life began to rebuild itself. Clara, with the support of the community, opened a small veterinary clinic in the neighborhood. Her talent and dedication were soon noticed, and the neighbors welcomed her with open arms. One morning, while Clara was tending to an injured puppy, a group of neighbors approached her. Clara, we want to thank you for everything you've done. This community is a better place thanks to you, said an older woman with a warm smile. Thank you for your support. I couldn't have done it without this wonderful community, Clara replied, feeling a deep connection to her new home. Samuel, for his part, also saw a significant change in his professional life. His dedication and skill during the crisis had not gone unnoticed. One day, the hospital director called him into his office. "Samuel, we've seen your commitment and leadership. We want to offer you the position of chief of doctors," the director said, extending his hand. Samuel, surprised and honored, accepted humbly. "Thank you. It's an honor. I'll do my best to live up to this responsibility." The support from his colleagues was immediate and sincere. "You deserve it, Samuel. You've always been an example to all of us," said one of his colleagues. The community and the hospital flourished under the new changes. Samuel, Clara, and the children found a new balance, enjoying the peace and security they had longed for. The car moved slowly along the dirt road, kicking up a slight cloud of dust. In the back seat, the children laughed and chatted animatedly, filling the air with contagious energy. Samuel and Clara, sitting in the front, exchanged knowing glances, enjoying the moment. They arrived at Grandpa Harold's farmhouse, a rustic and cozy structure that emanated warmth and history. The family got out of the car and were greeted by the sound of leaves rustling in the wind and the singing of birds. "Come on, kids, there's a lot to do before the gathering," Samuel said, smiling at the excitement on the faces of Lucas, Ethan, and Emma. They entered the house and began the preparations. Clara and Samuel took care of the kitchen while the children decorated the living room with garlands and flowers. The atmosphere was cheerful and festive, filled with laughter and lively conversations. "Grandpa Harold would be proud to see us all together here," Samuel said as he chopped vegetables for the salad. "Yes, he always wanted this house to be filled with love and life," Clara replied fondly, remembering the man who had been a father figure to them all. The afternoon progressed, and the house was filled with family and friends, all gathered to celebrate the life and legacy of Grandpa Harold. The table was laden with delicious dishes, and conversations flowed freely. In a quiet moment, Samuel took Clara's hand and led her out to the porch, where the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with golden and pink hues. "Clara, there's something I want to tell you," Samuel began, his voice full of emotion. Clara looked at him, her eyes reflecting curiosity and affection. "What is it, Samuel?" Samuel knelt down, taking a small box out of his pocket. "Clara, ever since you came into my life, everything has changed for the better. We've faced challenges, and we've built a beautiful family. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Clara, with tears of happiness in her eyes, nodded vigorously. "Yes, Samuel, yes, I will marry you." The children, who had been watching from the doorway, ran towards them, hugging them excitedly. "Congratulations, Dad." "Congratulations, Mom," they exclaimed, their voices filled with joy. The news of the proposal spread quickly among the guests, and the celebration became even more lively. The night continued with music, dancing, and laughter, each moment filled with love and camaraderie. Later, as the family sat around the fireplace, Ethan looked at Samuel and Clara. "I never thought I'd have a family like this," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "Neither did we, Ethan," Samuel replied, smiling. "But now we're here together, and that's all that matters." Clara nodded, hugging the children. "We're a family, and we always will be." The night wore on, and Grandpa Harold's farmhouse was filled with a sense of peace and unity. Samuel looked around, feeling completely content. He knew that the future would bring new challenges, but he was also certain that together, they could face them all. "A toast," Samuel said, raising his glass. "To family, to love, and to the bright future that awaits us." The glasses clinked softly, and everyone drank, feeling the promise of a future filled with hope and happiness. The new blended family embraced their destiny, knowing that no matter what, they would always be bound by the ties of love and trust. Hello everyone, thank you for joining us until the end of this emotional story. Through their challenges and struggles, our protagonist family found love, unity, and happiness. Everything that happens has a purpose, and even though we may face difficult times, it's important to keep faith and hope. Happiness and peace will come into our lives when we least expect them, as long as we act with kindness and generosity. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell to receive updates on our upcoming stories filled with life lessons and moving moments. See you next time, and God bless you.